Hey good people, and welcome back to the channel. Today is actually my birthday, and I won't be on here as much today, but I did want to upload this video, and I want to thank everyone out there that already wished me a happy birthday. But in a few moments, I'll be sharing my thoughts and feelings on episode 3 of Ready to Love Miami. And for this review, I simply plan to talk about the elimination process, give an overall rating for the episode, and I'll also discuss the connections that were featured. So without any further delay, let's jump right in. In episode 3, the ladies now have the power to eliminate, and Nephew Tommy challenged all the ladies to take the guys on dates and tell them a secret that they normally wouldn't tell guys that they date early on. Some of the women really took the challenge seriously, and some not so much. But when it was all said and done, Blake and Febreze were nominated for elimination. Now I can understand why Febreze was nominated. For one, he came out the gate talking about sex. And the cardinal rule for dating is that a man is not allowed to so much as think about the topic of sex unless the woman gives him a verbal go-ahead or the woman is physically attracted to him. Well, the ladies were neither with Febreze. And to tell the truth, I wouldn't be surprised if production had issues finding men who wanted to be on the show for the season, and they happened to find Febreze at the last moment and cast him without doing any of their homework. But Blake's nomination was a little disappointing. I think some of the women on the show were upset because Blake doesn't want to have kids anymore, which is within their right. But again, I find it interesting because in seasons past, the women have nominated men who wanted to have kids for elimination, and this is simply because those particular women didn't want to have kids. But I think some of the women aren't feeling Blake because he doesn't throw himself at the women like some of the other guys do. But I was completely in shock with what Jeffrey said about Blake. According to Jeffrey, Blake is controlling. He told her that she is his pick, and he no longer wants to continue the process. Pretty much a stalker. And it initially seems like Jeffrey wasn't trying to get locked down by Blake, and she was trying to paint him in a negative light so that he would be in the running to get voted off, thus leaving her to enjoy the process. Now, how true is all this? Only Blake and Jeffrey know. But in my opinion, Blake is already operating on borrowed time, and he would likely be gone in the next elimination without Jeffrey painting him to be a bad guy. But with Blake denying the Jeffrey's allegations, and with Sue-Ann calling Jeffrey out for being a liar in the preview for next episode, I have to wonder if we have yet another situation on the show where a woman is deliberately lying on a man or misrepresenting the facts in order to get the cast members and the fans on her side. It's happened several times in the past, and it's kind of disappointing to see it when it happens. But on a scale of 1 to 10, I'll give this episode a 3. It was predictable, and while it was nice to see some genuine connections get explored, I wasn't a fan of how Jeffrey tried to do Blake towards the end of the episode. It seems like a familiar page out of the Ready to Love playbook if you ask me. But let's move on to the connections. The first date for the episode was a double date. Mercedes invited Sue-Ann, Mark Anthony, and Blake on a Kangoo date. Now, I've never seen or heard of the term Kangoo before, but the cast members were essentially wearing trampoline boots, which looked like an expensive yet tiring experience. I commend Blake and Anthony for going along with the date idea, because if Justice from last season had been on the show, he would have likely been over it pretty quickly. But during the date, I liked the connection that Mercedes and Mark Anthony were building up. Mercedes is still my top pick for the female cast members for the season, and this is because of her natural beauty, along with her soft nature and down-to-earth personality. I'm sure she will have the most amount of guys on the show trying to get at her. I think it's too early to tell if Mark Anthony is the guy for her, but so far, they have good chemistry. Then there was the one-on-one with Blake and Sue-Ann. And I don't mean no harm, but Brother Blake needed to lighten up during the date. He came off as stiff, and he looked like he was trying to audition for one of those movies that comes out on Tubi. His humor was dry, but he's Sue-Ann's best connection. Going forward, however long that is, I think Blake just needs to relax and take a shot or two before going out on a date. We then have Cynthia and Andre going out on their date. Now, the more and more I continue to see Cynthia on the show, the more she's becoming my favorite female cast member. She's simply stunning to look at, but it's pretty clear that she's been dealing with the wrong men for a lot of her life. And as a result, she's had to filter all the guys that have been showing interest towards her. I think that Andre made all the right moves towards Cynthia during their date, and he was literally her shoulder to cry on, which went a long way. I think at this point, Andre still has a connection with Jeffrey, which he might want to end. After this date, it seemed like Cynthia was pretty much all in on Andre, and Andre kissing her hand didn't help the matter. I think that if Andre isn't all in on Cynthia, then he might want to be 100% honest with her. In my opinion, Cynthia might go into fight or flight mode if she feels like Andre is lying to her or rejecting her, so it would behoove Andre to proceed with caution. Then there's Corvea and Febreze, and on top of their date being very awkward and cringy, Febreze looked like Corvea's granddad or sugar daddy when they were sitting next to each other. This was never a good date, but in my opinion, Febreze is only doing what he was paid to do, which was to make things interesting on the show. Next, there's a double date with Morgan and Marcia seeing Lyndon and Tony. Now right off the bat, there seems to be some kind of rivalry between Tony and Lyndon, but Tony uses this date to make his move on Morgan. In the meantime, Lyndon uses the date to prove his inability to read the room. Seeing Lyndon fail at giving Marcia a random, unromantic kiss made me embarrassed for him. If Marcia was truly feeling him, then she would have let things ride. Unfortunately, I don't think Lyndon will be able to dig himself out of this hole. Then there's the date with Jeffrey and DeMario. They go horseback riding, and the most notable thing about this scene was watching Jeffrey's horse have happy feet, which made the horse dance like it had the Holy Spirit. It seemed like DeMario and Jeffrey had good chemistry, but it's still too early to tell if they will be going anywhere with the connection. And lastly, there's the date with Janique and Lyndon. Seeing Janique on this date, I admire how she was able to reel in her outgoing personality because it was a bit much to take in during her introduction on the show. But sadly, seeing Janique interact with Lyndon, it seemed like Janique had been more into Lyndon than he was into her. I think in order to stay on the show, Lyndon will play along with Janique, but if Morgan or Marcia becomes available, then he will leave Janique expeditiously. But those are my thoughts on the connections, and this marks the end of my review. If you have any questions or comments related to the review or the episode, feel free to leave them all below in the comment section, and I'll be sure to reply to everybody. Until next time, stay tuned, stay safe, peace.